difficulties of building in Africa and helps you think even creatively. Maybe we have an advantage when building here because we have to hustle and we have to think out of the box. Maybe we're in a better position just because it's like a pressure cooker that allows us to develop ourselves more, think more creatively, work harder.
Why then do you think it isn't a popular concept?
There is a lot of negativity around. There is no funding. Yeah, it is so difficult to raise. The ecosystem is not that evolved and developed. I think there is a lot of negativity, which in a way, yes, many of those things are true. But then how do we use that to our advantage?
Diego, how are you?
Good, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. Let's jump right into it.
Fantastic.
So I'm going to ask you a contrarian question. What is the one truth, right? What is the one thing that you know to be true when it comes to building ventures in Africa that very few people agree with you on? So like if you were to say that, you won't win the popularity contest, but you know it's true.
That's a very good question. Let me think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Look, I think people have the perception that it is more difficult, which is true. But at the same time, the difficulties of building in Africa helps you think even creatively. So I don't know if this is the big contrarian opinion, but maybe we have an advantage when building here because we have to hustle and we have to think out of the box like any entrepreneur does, but maybe a bit more because of the constraints of being surrounded by an ecosystem that's not as advanced as other ecosystems in terms of funding, in terms of startups themselves, in terms of industry, in terms of market. So yeah, maybe it is better. Maybe we're in a better position just because it's like a pressure cooker, that allows us to develop ourselves more, think more creatively, work harder. Yeah.
That's interesting. That is such an interesting way of putting it. I want to double down on it. Why then do you think it isn't a popular concept?
Well, I think, look, there is a lot of negativity around. There is no funding. Yeah. It is so difficult to raise here. There is the ecosystem is not that evolved and developed. I think there is a lot of negativity, which in a way, yes, many of those things are true. But then how do we use that to our advantage, right? Yeah, maybe I'm just trying to look at it from the silver lining,
No,
But yeah.
absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. So then, if we stay here, you say a couple of interesting things: the ecosystem being nascent on the scene, and which comes with a lot of kind of anticipated mistakes and errors when it comes to perhaps supporting the builder, the tech founder. And in terms of investment, can we talk a little bit about, because you said it, that could be the one misconception. Well, okay, cool. There's a lot of red tapes, there's a lot of this, there's a lot of that, therefore might not be ideal to build or might not be ideal to invest in. But you beg to differ in saying that, well, that could be an advantage because then that forces us to think outside the box. Can you give me a practical example of how this is an advantage? Like in your personal experience building, we're gonna get to talking about what you're doing in a minute, but yeah, how has that been an advantage?
Look, I can mostly speak about biotech because that's our area of expertise and where we operate. Certain things about biotech might not apply to all the tech. Because it is deep tech mostly, so it's a different type of ecosystem and investors. But for example, our main investors is One Bio Venture Studio. They only are one of the few biotech VCs in the continent, right? Specifically for biotech, right? So yes, it is tough because there are not many VCs that invest in biotech in Africa, but at the same time, when we go raise elsewhere, we can say, hey, we are backed by the biotech VC of Africa, you
Mhm.
know? That
Yeah.
makes us in a way special. So I suppose it's about storytelling as well and how you
Yeah.
sell yourself.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, this is not like a very deep example. I would have to think
No,
deeply about your
absolutely.
question, but
Absolutely. Yeah.
just to use that um, apparent disadvantage that we have here to flip it around. Um, I'm sure there are so many examples of like the day-to-day, the building, where you're forced to think more creatively or more in a more innovative way because sometimes you don't see a way out or the market's too small, so you start thinking bigger. So I
Mm.
think there's always in a day-to-day as well when that apparent disadvantage of building in South Africa and in Africa you can actually use it
Mhm.
for the best.
100%. So if we were to take your business in the biotech industry, whatever exactly what you're doing, and teleport you to the US, for instance, or to some European country, would it
Yeah,
have been would the journey have been easier? Surely it would have been different, but would it have been
I
easier,
think so. Look,
difficult? Yep.
yeah, it's difficult to say, and the grass is always greener elsewhere, right?
Yeah.
But in theory, yes. On paper, if we had built Biomine in Boston, for example, or in Cambridge, it would have been easier to raise, to find the right advisors, the right partners, the right distributors. In theory, yes. But on
Is
the
it
other
because
hand, yeah,
there's a just sorry sorry to cut you. Is it
yeah,
because there are a lot more investors that side? Because you mentioned there's only one biotech investor here that you're
yes.
aware of.
Look,
Yeah.
I think it's a combination of everything, right? It's yes, the sheer number of investors, but it's also the ecosystem, right? In Boston and Cambridge, specifically for biotech, there are so many universities that are dedicated or they specifically push a lot of spin outs, right? Or spin off companies. And there is a lot of startups, there is a lot of pharma companies, there is a lot of big biotechs. So whatever you're building, you can be building for your customer who's next to you. So you can have the conversations already there, or you can attend the conferences where you can do customer discovery interviews or validation chats. Um,
Mm. Yeah.
you can yeah, it's more than just a number of investors. It's the whole ecosystem. There are like accelerators there,
Mm.
incubators. At some places you literally go out for at a coffee shop and you can hear people pitching to each other, at least that's
Sure.
what I've heard. I haven't
Yeah.
experienced that firsthand, but that's what I've heard.
Mhm.
So in that regard, I think it would have been in theory on paper better.
Yeah.
But my contrarian view would be that maybe we wouldn't have thought more creatively or built more resilience, I guess.
I like that. I
Yeah.
like that. Okay, that's actually a nice segue into talking about Biomine, which is and you
Mm.
excuse me, you mentioned accelerators, and I heard that you were part of Techstar at some point. So we're gonna
Yes,
need to talk about that. How does one get
of
into
course.
Techstar and the impact it has had on your building journey, venture building journey?
Yeah,
But tell us a
sure.
little bit about maybe let's take a step back. Who is Diego Castillo, and how did you go from being a scientist to becoming a founder and to now building
Hmm.
Biomine? Take us through that journey.
Of course. So I have always been a nerd. I've always loved science and biology. Uh, Many people, when you start a bachelor's in science, they studied because they want to get into medicine. For me, I always just liked biology. I was obsessed with it since I was a kid. So then I studied a bachelor's in science in human genetics and human physiology. Then I did honors, which is like the fourth year right here of your studies. And then easy or the usual next step is to do a master's, which I did. I studied the blood microbiome of Alzheimer's disease patients. And then at that stage, I liked the research and what I was doing so much in terms of the microbiome that I said, no, I want to do a PhD because it's exciting. And then I switched a bit and I did microbiomes for planetary health. I studied bacteria and other microorganisms in the Southern Ocean, which was wild as well because I got the opportunity to go to Antarctica and it was amazing. But just to say that I've always wanted to solve problems, and during my academic career, let's say, it was obviously scientific-based issues or problems, research questions. At the same time, I've always wanted to commercialize or to use what I do more practically, not just to publish papers. When I was doing honors, that's actually when I met Vaughan, my co-founder. And then we shared the genetics lab there, and we were very close to using the PCR machines of the lab to to do some paternity tests, which in theory we were not allowed to do. But so thankfully we didn't do it. We didn't get in trouble. But just to show you that already there, the little bug of let's commercialize science was present there.
Sure.
Then I already knew that the pure academic path wasn't for me, but I was very happy to continue with my PhD, and to learn as much as I could in terms of the skills that I needed to understand and use microbiomes for human and planetary health. But then I was always thinking, okay, what's the next step? What's the next step? And then Vaughan and I always kept in touch. We've been friends since we did honors. And then at a stage when I had finished my PhD and I was doing a short postdoc, just finishing up some papers and thinking of my next move, Vaughan had sold a business that he had, a proof of concept for a vertical farm business. And then it was like the perfect timing when we were both like, remember that dream that we've had to start a company, a biotech company. Look, let's do it now. Perfect timing, You kind of finished a chapter of your life. I finished mine, and then we said, okay, let's come up with something, And then we started thinking about potential ideas, what we could do that we could actually use to commercialize science, specifically around the microbiome, which was my area of expertise. And he's also a scientist by nature, so he understands it and he's excited. He was excited about it. And then, yeah, I mean, I think it was a period of 3 to 6 months of back and forth thinking of what was going to be the company and the idea and the problem to solve. And then we started pitching. And then we pitched to one buyer at a stage, and they hated our idea, but they liked us. So they said,
Sure.
yeah, that doesn't make sense, guys. It's too small. Think bigger. Go read From Zero to One by Peter Thiel, and then come back to us with a better idea or with a bigger idea.
Wow.
Think bigger, And then, yeah, Vaughan and I took that as a challenge. And then when we came back with different iteration, they were like, okay, this sounds interesting. This could work. And then to de-risk their investment, what they used to do, they used to facilitate a grant from CIFA and then from the South African government, basically. And then we got that grant awarded to start doing some work from public data, such as computer-based bioinformatics, which is also my area of expertise, plus setting up a study, a collection of stool samples to study the gut microbiome, which is the bacteria that live in people's gut, of people with mild cognitive impairment that could later develop Alzheimer's disease. So we got that together, and for 1 year we pushed really hard, and then one buyer saw that we were serious about it, and then they decided to invest in us proper, and then that's when we started raising our pre-seed to build this microbiome platform, which is a collection of data of people's gut bacteria, basically. So that's how it started.
Yeah.
There has been lots of development and changes since then, because yes, as any entrepreneur, when you start, you have an idea, and then the more you know about it, the more you realize, okay, what are we doing here? This is scientifically exciting, but who's going to buy it? Who are we developing it for? How are we going to commercialize it? And I think it's even trickier for deep tech founders
Hmm.
that have this very tech background, like science for us, where we're very used to solving crazy problems, but we haven't been taught how to think from the other side. Like they say, well, if you cure cancer, like you sort, right? I mean, build any startup that cures cancer and you'll make it. Not really, because you have to say, who are you going to sell it to? Is it going to be funded by medical aid or not? What cancer? Is it going to beat the current therapy, the incumbent? Is it going to be cheaper or more expensive? So there's so many things to think about. It's not just about curing cancer, right?
Yeah.
It's about how you're going to sell it, to whom. Validating those commercial hypotheses was something that we were not taught in academia, obviously.
Yeah.
So that was the exciting part that allowed us to navigate our startup. We still, let's say the common thread was to build this microbiome platform with human data. We even ventured towards the vaginal microbiome for reproductive health and fertility for women. So we have assembled this big data repository of our own proprietary samples, as well as we have mined thousands and thousands of public databases of raw data and analyzed it. So now what we have is this platform that has different applications, right? And what we have done commercial-wise is that we launched a direct-to-consumer gut microbiome test about 9 months ago. And then we have other products in the pipeline that we will launch after 6 months and after another 6 months or so on, while we still develop this big engine of microbiome data, which is like the core of our research and development.
For the average human being out there who's hearing microbiome for the first time, why should they care about it?
That's a good question. Yeah. So as I said, especially in your gut, you have bacteria everywhere in you, on you, right? But there is lots of them. Most of them are in your gut. And you have more or less 30 trillion human cells in your body, and you have 38 trillion bacteria cells in your body. So you even have a little bit more bacteria than human in you. With almost like vessels of bacteria walking around,
Right.
which is crazy to think about. And just to say that there's so many of them, but also, I mean, I've been studying microbiomes for more than 10 years, and the intricate ways in which these little minions, these little machineries work together and interact with our cells on a day-to-day, keeping us healthy, still drives me crazy. It is insane. For human health, how your bacteria interact with your body is crucial. So it can help you literally from digestion, which is the obvious, to mental health, skin health, mood, energy. The gut microbiome specifically is the biggest mediator for human health that connects your outside wall to your inside wall, to your biology. And it has been also overhyped at the same time. It's not the root cause of all disease, but it's almost like this big highway where like all these little cars, which is your cells and your chemicals passing through your body, interact. So if you keep that highway healthy, then you're going to be healthy. It impacts your daily life so much.
So obviously, with all this data that you've collected and the research that you have, the platform that you built, you're able to, using your own words here, this highway of interactions between the bacteria and the healthy cells within your body. You kind of able to monitor that and tell somebody whether it's like it's too much of it, too little of it, they're at risk or something. Is that how it works?
Correct. That is for the specific product that we have now out in the market is a microbiome test. So we take a sample from you, right? We extract the bacteria, we analyze it, we put it in our platform. And yeah, as you said it correctly, we give you a list of what bacteria you have, if they are in balance, or if there's any imbalance, or if you have too much of good or of bad bacteria, too little of the good ones, and what to do about it, or what to eat more of, or what supplementation maybe you may need, what to eat less of, what lifestyle changes to make, so that you can optimize and improve that little army of good bacteria that you need to be healthy every day.
So this is really cool. And this is an off-the-shelf product, or do you need prescription to have it?
No, it's so how we have shaped it as a wellness tool. So we are not claiming any diagnostic conclusions that we get from it, because that's not the purpose of it. The purpose of it is that, yes, you can go to our website, order it online, and then you take the sample. We collect the sample from the kits that we also deliver to your house before that. And then we give you basically this magnifying glass so that you can look inside your body and see what's happening with this bacteria that should be keeping you healthy instead of pushing you towards conditions, right? So because of that, how we have framed it and launched it, it is a wellness tool. We are working on other tests that are more diagnostic grade, which will be longer to market because obviously there is regulatory approvals and other research that we need to get there. But that's part of the big plan. But this specifically is the product that we have out in the market. Yeah.
Yeah, we will put the description to a link to your website in our
Thanks. I appreciate it.
Yeah,
thanks.
Sure, no problem. That's interesting. So that's deep tech world, right? So it's clearly very different from building any other tech startup.
Yes,
that's number one. Building it in Africa, that's number two. And do you find that there are a lot of red tapes around building in your industry, particularly on the continent?
Look, in terms of regulatory, I think it is pretty standard, at least in South Africa. Like we do follow like strict, regulatory. We have a SAPRA, which is basically our FDA, right? And it is strict as it should be, and there is also you need like specific approvals. For example, for us, we're working on ISO 13485 for software as a medical device for our platform, which we don't need to launch this wellness product necessarily, but for other products, we might. It would be better because we can get our product CE marked, which is a European standard. Just to say, we do follow a lot of the European standards in South Africa. So it is as hard as it should be in this space. It's not like it. Look, sometimes it feels like a lot, but when it comes to health, you have to have certain rail guards because yes, you can't just claim things that are not true. And we are scientists, so we respect that and we want to do things properly. You mentioned deep tech. It is deep tech, but at the same time, we kind of have evolved to already commercialize something and spin it out and make revenue, because traditionally for biotech, you don't even have to make revenue. If you're doing the research, let's say, for example, to discover what was our original idea, to use a microbiome as a therapeutic, right? For a specific condition, like mild cognitive impairment or Alzheimer's disease. You just do R&D for 10 years until you can put it through, the whole pipeline of clinical trials. And then you just hit milestones, and that's how you raise, right? So for us, we have actually, it's a blended thing between this deep tech, which is the basis of our platform, but we have also we're also open to making revenue and make it more sustainable and not just depend on that big IP play, which I think relates to the African conversation that we're having, because in South Africa, there is no gut microbiome test in the market. Or in most countries in Africa. If we were building this in the US or in the UK, the US has Biome, the UK has Zoe. Now South Africa's got Biomine.
Yeah, there we go.
Exactly. So this is again how we started the conversation. This is an opportunity because yes, the market's smaller, but there is no direct competition. And South Africa is such a diverse country with many ethnicities, races, religions, foods, dietary requirements, or diets. So to build a gut microbiome test for our diverse population is something that no one else can do. So that is an advantage of doing it here.
Is there anyone else doing it on the continent? Because I know in South Africa you are the only ones, but at a continental level?
There are a couple of startups also working on it, especially in the big hubs in East and West Africa, but nothing big. So our dream is to also collaborate with them as they grow, and then we can together build a microbiome for the continent, microbiome company or microbiome center of excellence for the whole continent. Yeah.
So there's a few things now that you've mentioned that made me think, because of all these regulations that you have to go through, and if you want to go to the US, you need to be FDA approved if you have devices and things like that. You've mentioned to have that CE stamped from European market. Are you building, because we're talking about building with the end in mind. So is that how you're building? Are you building with the prospect of expanding outside of the borders? So as you're building, you're thinking, okay, other markets as well, how it's going to impact them, or you're just focusing on really capturing these beachhead markets, which is where you are right now, and then we'll think about expanding later on. How are you building?
Look, we're doing both. We see the opportunity of South Africa not having a South African and an African and having an African microbiome company per se, a big player, right? But at the same time, because we're using diverse samples that very few people have access to, we're building tests and diagnostics in the future that can be applicable to many different people, not just to like specific white people from Europe or from the US.
Yeah.
And you have diverse populations all around the world, not just in South Africa, right? So it can be applicable to, Southeast Asia, for example. It can be applicable to Afro-Americans. Like the expansion is potential is crazy. And on the other hand, the other advantage that we have in South Africa is that OpEx is cheaper. We can get more work done with less money. And the talent is as high as in the US or Europe or Asia. So having amazing people, amazing scientists, and amazing tech people that you can afford or that you can work more with less amount of money gives us a massive advantage, because our idea as well is to create this test that can compete with the incumbent when it comes to like a diagnostic down the line. It can compete with the incumbent that is around Europe and the US, because it's going to be applicable to more people, one, and two, it's going to be cheaper.
Gotcha.
So that is the advantage.
Yeah, no, indeed. I was talking to another biotech founder that unfortunately had to close down their business, and what they told me, some of the reasons why they had to close down, besides funding, is the fact that big manufacturing US companies have been working on a similar concept for substantially longer period of time, and they statistical analytics were not conclusive and the results were not good. They had these are we're talking about people with like millions of USD in funding on these projects.
Yeah.
And they didn't succeed at it. And therefore, down here in South Africa, this biotech company thought, well, if they didn't succeed, well, we're surely not going to succeed. But but you talk about talent being at the same level as anywhere else, as good as it can be. But I'm a bit conflicted when I hear stories like this.
Yeah, I think there is a big misconception, right, about if you pump $5 million versus $1 million, the company that you give $5 million will succeed versus the company you only give $1 million will not. I think that's a big fallacy. Or having the same resources in the US versus having the same resources in South Africa, that US company will succeed. Why? I mean, I think that's a complete fallacy, and it comes from prejudices and misconceptions of people thinking that Africa and South Africa, specifically for us, that there's not enough talent, or there are so many prejudices, right? I think personally, it's about execution,
Yeah.
If you can execute here versus in America, if you can execute with less money versus having a lot of money, like it's about executing, And sure, there are many people that have the same idea everywhere in the world. And when you think, oh, that's a brilliant idea, so original, I'm 100% sure that out of the billions of people that inhabit this planet, someone else has had that idea. But the difference is, are you going to execute it or not?
Yeah.
And maybe they raise more money to execute the
So
same
much that
thing.
I want to
That
touch
doesn't
on now. You
guarantee
talked
that they're
about
going to do it right or well.
university
Not at
research.
all.
You talked about
Just that's my
talent. You talked
opinion.
about
That's how I see the
mindsets.
world. Really.
That's very interesting. Let's talk quickly about universities because I wanted to go
Okay,
back to
fair
something you
enough.
said when
Yeah,
you were
that's a good point.
researching. Yeah, you talked about IP, and there's this concept at university research level where it's publish or perish. The
Hmm.
idea of commercializing your research is not very popular or within research institutions. So I want to understand
Yeah.
why that is, because then at the end of the day, your research should benefit, it should be for the greater good and benefit society
Yeah.
first. Yes, advancement of technology and science, but if it can
Yeah.
have direct impact now on society, why do we frown upon the idea of commercializing? That's number one. And then, maybe let's start there.
Yeah. I think it's about, I personally think it's about priorities for a researcher. If you think about it, at least in our context in South Africa, many of them they depend on grants if they don't have like a tenure, like a permanent position at a university where they also have to lecture, which many do as well. But their research depends on grants, and they spend most of the time just getting funding for their students, for their research group, for the advancement of the area of interest, right? So for them, it would be, I think, a bandwidth problem, because they're interested, like they get funding from grants and the university, and what does the university and the funders ask? How many papers did you publish? How many citations from those papers? In what journals? They literally have metrics
Wow.
of how many, like according to what journal you publish, and that is like of a specific tier, you get
Mm.
specific points. And if you publish with other colleagues, you get sometimes less points, which is completely backwards, in my opinion. But anyways, let's not go on a tangent. The point is that I think the way that researchers are being basically assessed, by the
Mm.
funders and the employers, basically pushes them to just focus on research, and they don't have necessarily the bandwidth to think, oh, let me commercialize this. I think that's one, but two,
Mm.
they don't know about it. They
Sure.
haven't thought about it because they're focused on the research on their papers and they like it and they love answering research questions and the building blocks for that fundamental science, that later on might be applied to something.
Yeah.
But I've
Yeah.
spoken to researchers and they're like, yeah, I just love studying this specific one virus, and it blows my mind how the 7 genes that it has makes it do A, B, and C. And I'm like,
Right.
but what about vaccines for this virus?
Yeah.
I'm like, "No." Then they're like, I don't care about that. I mean, someone else will do it from my research that can take it forward, but I don't want to do it.
Right.
But I think you've touched on an interesting point, because in terms of deep tech, IP-rich startups and companies and biotech, university spin-outs are super important.
Mm.
And in South Africa, I'm not entirely sure about the rest of Africa because I don't know, but I'm assuming it's going to be similar.
Sure.
This idea of commercializing science or spinning out IP, it's not as common, it's not as popular. Whereas if you go to the US or to the EU, there are hubs, as I said, in Cambridge, in Boston, and other cities all around the US or all around the world, in Korea, where they spin out hundreds of startups per year, hundreds,
Wow.
because it's an engine for that.
Mm.
Um, that's part of their culture almost as a university. We do science, but we commercialize it.
Sure.
Whereas in South Africa, that's not a thing yet.
Yeah.
So I think we are very behind in terms of that. And
Is it
because
is
of
it is
that,
it because
the
just because of
yeah.
I mean, because we leapfrogging in many areas in many ways. I mean, if you
Hmm.
look at our banking
Yep.
system, for instance, it's one of the most advanced in the world. So there are a lot of things
100%.
that we're leapfrogging. So when
Yes.
it comes to institutions, that's where you find the smartest people. So what's happening? Like, why are we missing this?
Look, I think we'll have to dive deeper into it and see if someone has studied it,
Yeah,
because it also
absolutely.
blows
Because
my
I'm
mind.
asking if
It
it's
doesn't
not a
make
question
sense,
of,
right?
yeah, if it's not a question of, well, the structure of, the tech transfer office, for
It might
instance.
be. It might
Yeah.
be, yeah.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
also, for example, as a PhD student, I didn't even know there was a tech transfer office. Like, what is that? What is the point of that? Like, there's almost like a big, uh, like that's not a thing. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
now at Stellenbosch University, there is the launch lab, and they're pushing that hard, and they've had a couple of spin-outs or spin-offs already, which is great. From other backgrounds, but also for science specifically,
Yeah.
and they are doing really, really well and almost
Sure.
like pioneering that in South African universities. But I mean,
Mm.
what about UCT? What about WITS? What about UP and all the other big universities of the country? It's
Yeah.
not necessarily a thing yet. It's almost like, oh yeah, it's happened, and certain universities, like I think, for example, UP would be more for engineering, deep tech
Yeah.
startups, more that's more well known versus
For
maybe
sure.
at Stellenbosch more like biotech. So each
Absolutely.
university also has their own thing,
To each their
but
own. Yeah.
it's not a
No, fair
thing.
enough. Yeah, fair
It's not
enough.
a
Yeah.
thing.
And
I don't
look,
know why.
yeah, I mean, we're gonna have to dig deeper into that. But I do know that some
Yeah.
conversations are happening in that area.
Yes,
Universities are
yes,
coming
yes.
together. So let's watch this space and see what happens.
Yes.
I do want to segue into because your journey is so rich, man. There's so much to unpack here. But you, from research, you find your co-founder. I want to talk about finding a co-founder because it seems like you have the perfect co-founder. Your story seems like an outlier. You're a bad example. Like everything seems to just have fallen into place at the right
Not really,
time.
man.
Yeah.
It
Okay.
sounds like
Talk
it.
about it. Like
Yeah.
finding the. I
Look,
want to
if
understand finding the right co-founder because that's I've spoken to
okay.
hundreds of founders, and
Yes,
there are a lot
yes.
of like really sad stories about co-founders
Yeah,
splitting, especially when the money comes in and
yeah.
things like that. So finding the right co-founder. I want to understand that and then perhaps talking about when is from your perspective, when is a good time in biotech? You've done your research, your validation. When is a good time to actually hit the markets and officially
Yeah.
launch and things like that? Yeah.
Let me start with the second one, quickly. I think um it depends, to answer your second question, if your deep biotech startup comes from a rich IP that was span out from a university, for example. It can take 5, 10 years, depending on what it is. If it's a therapeutic, then it's FDA approval, or less. If it's a diagnostic, that approval maybe it's a bit shorter. It depends. Um, if it's not necessarily like super IP rich, then in a way you have to, like us, right? We didn't spin out from a university. It's our research, but
Mhm.
we can't compete with someone that came from a research group, and whatever IP they have comes from 30 years of research,
Yeah.
and then they span out something from that. So
Yeah.
for us, revenue is more important, because that's also our IP. It's not just a scientific IP. It's the
Sure.
market is our IP, the distribution, our branding is our IP. So for
Yeah.
us, someone like us, it's even better to go earlier to market. That's just how I see it from our personal experience.
Mhm.
Then you said that for my story, it seems like everything fell into place. That's obviously because I'm summarizing it, but it's a crazy roller coaster,
Yeah.
especially being in the microbiome space and
Mhm.
understanding that as we started, okay, let's go the FDA route for a therapeutic versus a diagnostic versus the vaginal microbiome, and then going back to a wellness tool while building this platform. It is an absolute roller coaster, and
Sure.
we still haven't figured everything out, And as
Mm.
any startup, we're raising, and when the time comes, we either made enough money to sustain ourselves, or when the runway runs out, or we raised enough money to carry on, or we closed out. That's the startup story, right? So we don't know
Yeah.
what's going to happen, but we're trying our best. The one thing that I would say, again, speaking to many startups like you have been doing, that I have been super lucky about is the co-founding
Mm.
relationship, because Vaughan was a friend already.
Sure.
Obviously, I mean, he wasn't like a super close friend, but he was always a good friend, and we spent a year in honors, just bonding over failed experiments late at night in the lab, and we both like science nerds in that sense, you know.
Right.
So we bonded a lot that year, and then we went our separate ways, but we always kept in touch and we were always friends. Like, you know, when he was back in South Africa, uh, we touched base again, and we saw each other every now and then. He was obviously invited to my wedding, you know, so we were friends but not besties, right?
Sure.
Obviously, when we started Biomine, then our relationship evolved because now we spend time, a lot of time. There was already chemistry for sure,
Correct.
but we had to also evolve that relationship and understanding of, you know, like knowing each other even more, getting to know each other, communicating, almost like building up a relationship with your romantic partner, you know. It's
Sure.
not the
Sure.
same, obviously, but
Yeah.
it also takes work. You have to do the difficult conversations. But because we had that baseline of friendship, I think we have been so lucky that we've had a great relationship, you know, because we're not afraid of saying the truth or having the difficult conversations.
Yeah.
So I was very lucky that we were already friends and we had
Yeah.
chemistry. We have improved that friendship. But yeah, the luckiest part of my journey has been
Would you
to
encourage co-founders listening to you right now to work also on like friendship? Is that something that's important, or
yeah,
can okay?
100%.
All
I mean, sometimes we like so focused on the work that, you know, like it's just we forget we also like talking about Star Wars, you know.
right.
And then when we do a hike and we don't talk about work sometimes, that's like, oh yeah, and then we can just talk about anything, you know, from movies to philosophy to nature to our dogs,
Yeah.
you know, to build that friendship,
Sure.
super important. And I think
Amazing.
I'm so happy building it with Vaughn, with a friend,
Yeah.
because even if it doesn't work out, it's okay because I did it with my friend. If that
Wow.
makes sense.
That's I like
So,
that. That's really good.
yeah,
That's really good.
yeah,
And then okay, you got into textile. We're not gonna get like into the details, but you got into textile.
yes,
Can you tell us how does one get into textile? And I heard through the grapevines that apparently while you were at textile, you find someone with the exact original idea that you had that got investment from I think from they were from Europe or something like that. Remember that idea that you pitched to your first investor and they were like, this is a
yeah.
ridiculous idea. You met another
Oh, yeah.
startup over there that was doing exactly the same thing and got
Oh,
investment.
yes, yeah,
So
yeah.
so
Full
talk about
circle,
that a
yeah,
little bit. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, look, the other initial idea that we had was more about pets, microbiome. And look, it wasn't a bad idea, but I think our investors also were interested more in human health. So
Okay.
that's why they said it was a bad idea. Because, I mean, pets is a big market. It's a massive market. And so it was just not their interest,
But
right? So yeah, it was,
does it
yeah,
speak to the conversation we've been having about like priorities in different continents? Like obviously in the European
100%,
space,
100%.
that business makes a lot of sense,
Yes.
whereas in an
Yeah, but
African
look,
context, yeah,
maybe, yeah, maybe. Yes and no. I think it's also maybe if you're in Europe or in America, you have 30 biotech VCs in one hub, in one city.
hmm,
So if the one is interested in human health, the other one's interested in maybe animal health. Who knows, you
yeah,
know? So in our case, there was just the one that for the microbiome, it was more, they were more interested in human health.
yeah,
But at the same time, yeah, South Africa, I'd say is maybe the exception. But yeah, I mean, African, and I don't know much about that world, but in theory, yes, pets are more important, I think, outside of Africa, but now Africans are changing as well. Oh, Techstars.
how
So
did you get into Techstar and what was the
yes.
experience? Yeah.
So Techstars is this global accelerator program, and they have a program in different like cities around the world. A couple of cities in the US, in Europe, in Asia as well. I think, I'm not sure. But anyways, it's after the YC is like the second biggest accelerator in the world, but differently from the YC, there are different programs all around the world, whereas the YC is just in San Fran, right? Um, so we applied to Techstars with the idea of using our platform for the vaginal microbiome fertility space, because that was the development of our platform at that point in time. And it was a month and a half of interviews and rounds. I mean, super competitive. Out of all the people that applied, I think they only take like a small percentage. I can't remember now, but we worked it out. I don't know if it was like 1% or
Wow.
it was super competitive. Um, but the idea that we pitched to them applying our platform for that specific angle of fertility in the vaginal microbiome space was fantastic. They loved it. They loved our team. Um, and then yeah, we got accepted after 5 or 6 rounds of interviews and drilling.
Wow.
And then we got into Texas, London. So that year, 2024, we were there in London for 3 or 4 months, just in the
Okay.
incubator. And that helped a lot because I think that also opened our minds and our horizons and showed us the difference that an European ecosystem can make
Hmm.
because everyone is building around you. There's many more VCs, there's angel investors that we didn't even know it was a thing, you know.
Wow.
Um, I think that was one of the eye-openers to see, okay, yes, it is good to be in a bigger ecosystem. The positives of that was like, wow. So if you're building in Africa and you can get that minimal 3 month exposure to somewhere else like Europe or the US or even Asia through an accelerator incubator, I would highly recommend
Right.
because it was incredible. And just to tell you the one most important thing that I learned from that
Hmm.
experience personally, besides,
Yeah.
expanding our network and learning how to think of the market, besides the those technical skills,
Yes.
the one thing that I learned is that it doesn't, it usually, most of the times, it takes more than one try to get a startup going and right. Meaning, if you fail on your first try, it's okay. Most of them do. And then you try again, if you're an entrepreneur and that's what you want to do. And then you go again and you build your second startup. And if it fails, it's okay. Go and try your third one and your
Wow.
fourth one. And maybe by the fifth one will work. Because all the successful people that you meet,
Hmm.
many of them wasn't on the first try.
Sure.
Because you learn so much as you go. I mean, we've learned so much in these 3.5 years with Vaughan.
Yes.
And if you told us, yeah, would you build your startup differently if you were to start again? Of course, because the experience,
Right.
counts a
Yeah.
lot. And we would
100%.
think more about the market, and from the beginning have validation
Okay.
conversations, even if it's with pharma that it's going to be in 10 years, Um, so yeah, that was the biggest lesson of being part, at least temporarily, of that big ecosystem, is that it takes a couple of tries and it's okay. Which probably in San Fran, or in other parts of the US, that fail fast thing that they say, yes, you repeat it all the time in South Africa as well, fail fast, iterate. But fail fast also with your startup. And if it doesn't work, it's okay. Just fail fast and start another one and another one and another one until it works out.
We've covered lots of grounds, especially from
Mm,
a founder perspective. But I want you to maybe end with one thing that you mentioned quite a lot is team. You mentioned that for your first round that you raised, the investor that you approached when Bio said to you, we don't like your idea, but we like the team. So team. Then into tech to get into Techstar as well, they like the team. So it's an
100%.
important thing that you drilled on in this conversation.
Yeah, of
Yeah,
course.
and beside other things, like very important things, I want you to talk about, of course, you're not an investor, but what is the one thing that investors keep getting wrong about funding, especially let's talk maybe the biotech industry.
Sure. That's difficult because it depends on the funder, right?
Okay,
It
okay.
depends on the investor. Like
Clearly, one
investors
buyer is
that are
doing
maybe,
it's doing right. They know their stuff.
yeah. Yeah, I think investor, if they're more green, maybe they don't think necessarily about the other side, the market side as much as they should, or because they think it's a deep tech. Look, also that it's changing. Many deep tech investors, they also care about revenue now because it's not as easy to just raise money on IP or an idea. Um, it depends. But the one thing they look at, all of them, is team. And if you think about it, if you early, if it's pre-seed or even seed, I mean, you're investing in the team. The idea can change. You can pivot. Everyone's got the same. I'm sure someone else has the same idea and is building somewhere else, maybe with more money, as you said. But if they believe in you, if you have the right team, the right co-founders, are surrounded by the right people, you're investing in the people in the end, not in the idea. You know, the idea is almost secondary.
People. So that for me, this is the highlight of this conversation. It's about the people.
Yes.
It's about the people you're building
100%.
for. It's about the people who are building. Diego, thank you so much for your time. This was a rich conversation. Thank you very much.
Pleasure. Thank you very much for having me, Daniel.